Mindset control over attitude. With this discussion that a mindset control over attitude, we want to listen to the Mental Wellness Act. We want to today listen to the responsibility that the Mental Wellness Departmental Office have to legislatively adhere to their responsibility. When we today look at the Mental Wellness Act that I've mentioned in one of the previous videos that are in acknowledgement to the Hospitalised Act. And when the Hospitalised Act are acknowledged in accordance to legislation, then the Mental Wellness Act that becomes a responsibility for the legislative court of law to adhere to the Department of Wellness. When people are hospitalized in a hospital, and the hospitalized calculation goes over a certain percentage, and the Mental Wellness Act therefore calculates in accordance to the governmental's legislative responsibility to adhere to fair processes. Then the Hospitalised Act becomes the office that the Mental Wellness Act have to adhere to. The Hospitalised Act, there are when someone are admitted to hospital, the database are updated with the person's household information. And when the Act in accordance to the information update have to adhere to all that people are admitted in hospital for, then the Mental Wellness Act have to acknowledge the legislative court of law that are fair processes and that are fair responsibility. Therefore, today when we look at our 97.3% calculation, the calculation then acknowledges the responsibility that governmental leaders have to implement fair processes. And when the calculation that are our generations well acknowledgement, how well are we on our journey? How do we acknowledge how well we are? How physically well are we on our journeys that we walk? There are 100-year journeys. Then the implementation of fair processes becomes a legislative responsibility. And when business directors today think that they can do in the business world what they want to with their business that they own, then the legislative acknowledgement have to be adhered to. And when legislation have to be adhered to, then it includes all businesses. The legislative court of law would say not limited to this business or that business. And when a director today have to make sure that he implements processes that are fair, that are in acknowledgement, then he adhere to the Mental Wellness Act, to the implementation that are fair processes. And when today I've mentioned in one of the videos, so many people find themselves editing under hospital data board, informations of households. There are sometimes informations that the departmental office, the governmental departmental office are dependent on the accuracy of the informations that are updated on hospitalized data boards. When governmental officers have to give answer in accordance to the poverty state in countries, then governmental leaders are dependent on the hospitalized data board communications. In acknowledgement to all business communications, the hospitalized communication office have to be updating information that are accurate, that are non-manipulative, and that are in adherence to fair processes in countries. Then anyone can then write anything on a hospitalized data board when someone are hospitalized and you are the nurse and you are meant to update the information. But in all legislative acknowledgement, the accuracy of the information that the computerized communication in the hospital holds are then the dependent communication line that the governmental's mental wellness business office communication are dependent on. Then we can look at the household circumstances per house. But in accordance to legislation, the Hospitalised Act are walking hand in hand with the mental wellness responsibility that all countries have. And therefore the responsibility for countries to implement fair processes are therefore not only under the Department of Health or under the Department of the Department of Food, the Department you get the Department of Health under the Mental Wellness Communication line, the Department of Food that provides, that produces its foods, its groceries, the communication office. Then you also get the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense under the Mental Wellness Act that are then therefore responsible for households' communications to be adhered to. And when the Hospitalised Act forms part of the Hospital Data Board, the accuracy of information that governmental officers are dependent on, then the communications in the hospital that the hospital holds of households are communications that in my journey's education are sensitive informations. Then my brother said years ago that he went to hospital in a condition that could have been prevented. But when hospital data communications are not managed in all accuracy, then manipulation happens in hospital data boards. And when your household are called to a hospital and you could have lost your life in it. And I'm saying, but New Zealand, I'm sorting so much heart attacks out. Then the communication, I want to call you to the hospital to explain your bank card, your finances in your house, your food calculation that all grocery stores have to adhere to. When your house are accounted to be provided for in the country. And when the grocery store didn't contact you and your bank account was not scanned in the grocery store and your house did not get its food acknowledgement in the communication line, then the information all forms part of the mental wellness responsibility teams. In Europe, my sister Queen Antoinette are working in the mental health hospital. And when they work in the communication, then they learn the sensitivity that the informations are that are all in all accuracy, in all calculation, that countries have to adhere to. And when my brother King Anton called me in 2018 and he says, but he's now sitting at Tygerberg Hospital and the situation could have been prevented. But because people fiddle on the hospital data board, and because governmental leaders have to explain their communication officers that sometimes hold sensitive information, but that are sometimes not kept in all acknowledgement, in all responsibility. where anyone can access information on a computer data board, where those information should be highly restricted, highly coded, so that communications in all accuracy are then updated under the governmental data board. And when no one wants to do their work, I've mentioned on my Twitter tweet, when no one wants to do their work in the international world, and when the international world is so much dependent on the computerized informations, and when all people want to shift blame in accordance to how they want to feel fine at in their journeys, but they are employed in the responsibility communication line where they have to be responsible at. Then in all accuracy, in all sensitivity, the 97.3% mental well calculation that we have in the year 2025, 2026, mindset control over attitude, how well our generation has been, are then not yet in all fairness and responsibleness that the employees that have learned about the communication line have had to adhere to. And then it looks like a well calculation, like I educate in all the other videos. And 90% for first world countries look like countries that are implementing processes and where people feel fair in. But in our humanness, we feel so much unfairness in all the processes. It echoes all over the news internationally. But our country's build communications looks like 97.3 in all calculation. But yet it only calculates the communications that has been activated and that has been communicated through. It does not calculate the complete fair processes that countries and that governmental leaders have to adhere to. When a 90% in a first world country looks like your country was now mentally well in the journey, then quite a 10% are quite a calculation for first world countries. A 10% where all people can say that all people in a first world country doesn't feel the fairness in the processes. The country looks fair, it looks like the people are having a good time, it looks like the processes are built right, it looks like processes are implemented right. But the 10% are quite a distance. That acknowledge how mentally well our country are in our years. It's quite a distance for countries to still be implementing processes that are fair in all responsibility, in all that they have to be responsible at, in all that they have to acknowledge. The 90% the third world countries that are in wars today fall short on. Educate first world countries to learn to be responsible in the computerized communication. That sounds 90% in all accuracy in a first world country. But in a third world country, it's a 90% short. And when a third world country come and do the calculation again in America is cycloned in it. Because the accuracy of the information in America that the country that are in war are dependent on becomes the requirement for 100% mental wellness percentage. The computerized communication office can acknowledge that all health and safety responsibilities were adhered to. But that's only the computerized office. And when America today have to acknowledge the complete computerized communication line that are not yet only dependent on the American communications, but that are dependent on all international countries, then Kuwait, America has got Kuwait as a first world country with implementation of the processes. They've got quite a lot to answer under the White House Court of Law legislative responsibility. South Africa have got quite a lot to answer it. New Zealand government have got quite a lot to answer it. I always say New Zealand government being the very first Monday, processes looking in all accuracy. The communications that international countries receive are not accurate communications. The world have too much poverty, 50% of poverty. So much wars in our years. The information that America, that New Zealand, that South Africa have sent to international countries were not accurate information in accordance to me, Ribea Elise's journey. In accordance to my human resource education, the implementations in New Zealand were accurate. The implementations in all other countries that countries received that are in war were implementations, communications that were inaccurate information. All countries in the international world have a right to receive accurate information that they are dependent on, that are first world country information and that are acknowledged in their third world countries. And therefore the acknowledgement becomes one under the office business. There I say that me, Ribea Elise's birthroom, are the office business alienly, the office business computerized in all that were implemented on earth. I'm not only the seventh baby in my mama's womb, not only Genesis 1 verse 7, the communications by American television, Star Communications, the under the sea communications that are busy building in Dubai, the communications that were built on earth, and not yet only the explanation that I'm me in the birthroom on my journey, but the responsibility that governmental leaders have to implement accurate informations that countries are dependent on, are the responsibility that governmental officers in our years have to learn to adhere to under the office business. Because by no means am I, Ribea Elise, going to find myself so chaste, and I'm only 42 years old. By no means am I going to talk so loud in a communication line where I could have talked in so much calmness in all that my years have introduced to me. By no means are the computerized communication going to chase me so for informations, when it's all governmental officers' responsibility to adhere to legislation in all acknowledgement. By no means am I going to tweet on Twitter on a daily basis for governmental leaders to contact my evoke business and to implement processes that are fair in all that they were introduced to me on the journey in the Human Resource Office acknowledgement that hawks you to your business communication line at. By no means do you have to tweet about it. Do people have to shout on cell phone media about it? Do people have to shout in the international world about their business communication lines that have to be adhered to? By no means are the international world going to chase one another so in circles under such a sensitive communication line that have been so highly acknowledged. Biblically, Genesis 1 communication line. Not for us to have had wars by the time that me, Ribea Elise, arrived by my business communication. Not for governmental leaders to manipulate my human resource journey by the time that I arrived by my business communication. And now I have to release so much information that my universe brain communication by American television, Star Communication, can't keep the amount of information that governmental leaders have mentioned me, Ribea Elise's name in, that now makes me so much like I had to talk so much on a Twitter page. So much unevoked live stream video communication. So much explanations. And the only thing government had to do are that they have had to adhere to the responsibility that are all that they have learned about me on the journey. And for so much manipulation to form part of your brain communication, and you have to release information that no one told you most of the time, that you only have been introduced to based on how we communicate and based on how we receive communications being human beings. But I have to release so much information on social media, and until this point I yet don't even feel free in the communication line that are simple computerized communication line that are so greatly built in all school color acknowledgements, so greatly introduced in all its educational journeys. And for me, Ribea Elise, to feel like the whole Oompa laying on top of me. My mama had a good love all these years. She used to call me old barbecue, my old baby in the universe. For all the people to lay on the old barbecue. For all communications to be on my brain communication. Where my brain communication are highly sensitive in all that were implemented on earth. In all that were introduced on my journey. And I'm now only 42 years on the journey communication. And then in all responsibility, in all that we have to adhere to, the accuracy of informations that we are dependent on being governmental officials. The accuracy of informations, the implementation, the acknowledgement responsibility. To acknowledge someone else on the journey, it's of utmost importance in all that we learn in mental wellness. I've mentioned now a few educations on our HR 2025-2026 business restructuring with Ribea Elise. I've mentioned a few acknowledgement responsibilities that next week in those videos we're going to be talking about the statutory law, the Constitutional Act, the Act to be Responsible Act, in all that we hold legislative responsibility at, in all that legislation have to adhere to. In all that the law stipulates that has to be adhered to, that someone didn't communicate to you. Me, Queen Ribea Elise, didn't read all the law books in order to explain the information. I learned it on my journey in all accuracy in how I was walking the journey's communications. And when I relay the information, then it's in all acknowledgement, in all responsibility, in all adherence. And when the law are stipulated in all accuracy, in all calculation, in all that we've learned about the computerized communication, then it becomes a constitutional, responsible act that are non-negotiable for us to implement processes that are fair and right. And when our countries look kind and fine, and our human bodies can't yet feel it, and only certain people feel the excitement in the day. Only certain people feel when it's weekend, when it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Only certain people feel calm in all that they walk their journeys at. And then kindly governmental leaders have got quite a lot of work to do when they have to be responsible in their employment right. Their right to be responsible. Their right to implement processes that are fair, that are right, that are in acknowledgement. their right to then therefore have their fair 100 years on their journey. I always educate that your right to be responsible are your 100 years. Your right as a governmental leader to be responsible in your employment office are your 100 years. And then in all that we can implement and that we can manipulate the processes that we have learned about and that we are so dependent on. Then in all that we can play games in all the processes on. Then we have a right to be responsible in all that we can play games on, all the computerized communications on. In all the processes that are built on earth can be played a very good Chinese, Japanese, North Korean, South Korean, Vietnamese game. In all those computerized communications, it can be manipulated in so many directions in the universe, in how we walk our journeys differently, in how we were wombed differently. But then we have to learn and to educate ourselves to be responsible and to implement processes that are fair and that are right. But for a governmental leader today, or for a governmental official employee, to shift the communication of a community member only because their communication are different. Governmental leaders have to learn to be responsible. It's their right of employment. Governmental officials, governmental employees have to learn to be responsible. It's their right of employment to be responsible in all that they learn about the employment office. In all that the employment office introduced to them on the journey. Then the right of acknowledgement are to acknowledge all people that are dependent on them, that forms part of the same journey that we walk in our years, that performs part of the same communication line that our countries holds and that we walk our journeys in our countries on. And when we form part of the same communication line, that for someone it's a telephone line, it's also a computerized communication. For someone it's a vehicle. For someone it's a cell phone, mobile phone in the hand. For someone it's a film on television. And the communication line are all acknowledged in the legislative court of law that are the governmental's departmental office. Then the governmental officials that are employed in the communication line have a right to be responsible and to implement fair processes that are right in acknowledgement. And not only to implement, but to adhere to the right to be responsible under the Responsibility Act. It forms part of the Health and Safety Act. The Mental Wellness Act. The right to be responsible, the right to adhere to responsibility business. And the right to acknowledge all that has to be adhered to, all the legislative responsibilities that has to be adhered to. And while our mindset control over attitude, communication now calculates in all acknowledgement to how we are wombed in our years. While the mindset control over attitude, the mental wellness calculator, calculates in all accuracy of how we are wombed in our years. then the mental wellness processes that are being implemented are then dependent in the informations that serves the right to acknowledge how we were born in our years, how we were wombed in these 100 years. The right to acknowledge how we were wombed in hospitals in these 100 years. Those years ago, people did not give birth in hospitals to the baby. And then the accuracy of the hospitalized information are then in all acknowledgement to the Mental Wellness Calculation Act. Those years ago, families gave birth at home. These years ago, the computerized communication are then in acknowledgement to the Mental Wellness Act. And when the computerized communication in hospitals are in acknowledgement to the Mental Wellness Act, then the hospitals that are employed in the communication line have to adhere their responsibility to not manipulate the office that they are employed at. Because the computerized communication that are the Hospitalised Act, that are the Mental Wellness Act, becomes then so dependent. It becomes so dependent that the governmental legislative responsibility are so dependent on the Hospitalised Act, the Hospitalised database. And when the two offices become so one, then it's important that doctors, that nurses, that works with the communications information realize the sensitivity that are the communication line that they are employed at. Because for people on earth to chase one another so in circles for processes to be right, when all teams and departments have to legislatively adhere, then certain officers have to realize and learn how sensitive the information that they are employed at are then to the governmental legislative responsibility. When the earth has got so much happening, so much war, so much poverties, then the sensitivity of how we employ employees, then it becomes of utmost importance for government officers to realize why they are employing certain employees under the Hospitalised Act. In South Africa, there's so much people employed under the Hospitalised Act that are not even meant to work on such communications. They are not even meant to work near such communications. There's a Monique Mars in South African Paarl Hospital with her mother that are not even meant to work near Paarl Hospital communication. Why? Because Queen Mum Universe and George Villa in the womb, me Queen Ribea Elise in the womb were born at Paarl Hospital. Me Queen Ribea Elise in the womb are sensitive universe communications. It's Genesis 1 verse 7. It's Genesis 1 on the 7th day. It's God of all creation. And for South Africa to employ just anyone at the communication line, me Queen Ribea Elise feels highly disturbed in New Zealand, that I can't even wait to arrive in South Africa to deal with government of South Africa for all that I learned that New Zealand could manipulate my stay in the country about, that I shouted so loud in this house on. My voice communication in the house were made so loud by Paarl Hospital teams, by Middlemore Hospital teams where I gave birth to my first daughter with. By New Zealand television employees, New Zealand police manipulated the communication. So much communications went wrong in these 3 years in this New Zealand house that I can't even wait to arrive with that flight on Cape Town Airport. I can't even wait to deal with South African police for all that New Zealand manipulated my house's communications on. That was sensitive, highly sensitive informations. Information in high acknowledgement. In South Africa, me, Ribea Elise, have a communication line to go and deal with where my mama, a Queen Mom Universe and a George Philander, and was supervisor in Paarl Hospital's cleaning department. While Romano's buyers that were with me in Dalveda Primary School were manager at Mediclinic Hospital in Paarl. Me, Queen Ribea Elise, have got so much to go and deal with in that communication line of acknowledgement. When Romano's buyers were sitting next to me in Dalveda Primary School, and he got higher authority in the communication line of hospitalized informations than my Queen Mom Universe and a George Philander Home's house has got. And he was a child next to me in Dalveda Primary School, and it's highly sensitive informations. Not for governmental leaders to play so like a joke around. That all people had to find a way to manipulate the communication around me, and me, Ribea Elise, cannot be manipulated, like I say in my podcast. Manipulation, misinterpretation, miscommunication, not here by me. Not really by our Queen Mother and a George throne womb. So much sensitive information that I have to go and make sure that governmental South Africa adhere to their responsibility in the business office communication line. That I've been employed at in human resources, that I've been acknowledged at Niblibits, that our Queen Mom Universe and a George Philander Home School of Color Afrikaans Data Translation Journeys in the communication line are not only a telephone line, and it's no one's fun and play games. And for governmental officers to, in these years, play so much games around me that I have to find my way around it. That I have to sit in New Zealand and think, what are governmental leaders busy with in the communication? That my Evoke business didn't even get one cell phone media communication yet. That no one contacted my Evoke business yet. And it's such a highly acknowledged fashion communication in the heavens as well as on the earth, the Bible would say. Be it so in the heavens, so it are there on earth. The womb high in acknowledgement in my school color journey. And we don't only want to talk about school color acknowledgements, because certain of our parents didn't attend school many years ago. Then we talk about all that our countries are accessing in the heavens as well as under the earth, as well as under the seas, the Bible says in Genesis 1 verse 7. All communications that were built on earth. When those informations are so sensitive, then governmental, parliamentary officers have a responsibility to adhere to the sensitivity that are those informations. There are sounding in me, Ribea Elise's ears in New Zealand, that anyone could have then now made me sound so loud through a communication that they were employed at in Middlemore Hospital, New Zealand, in Paarl Hospital, South Africa, in New Zealand television, in South African television, in New Zealand governmental office, in South African governmental office, that they could access so much information about me that I was shouting so loud in this house. The house's voices communication was in the year 2025 so loud that I had to report it at the police station. That New Zealand television employees were playing so much games in the house's communication that there's no way that the communication would have gotten back to normal unless government intervenes in the communication and unless they get control by Television New Zealand. That I had to go and report it. That the person by the police station said to me, but it's not a police report. And I said, my dear, I went through so much already. That this communication in my house, my reason for my stay in New Zealand, have to be adhered to. My house's communication cannot be manipulated so much in yours, New Zealand. And then she went to go and call someone that looks like my brother King Richard. Then I thought they might have arguments in the country, but they have to adhere to my communication line. My reason that I'm in Auckland, New Zealand for. They cannot play so much games around it. By television New Zealand, they make the voice communication around loud, and then they send me 10,000 communications, and now it's 10,000 Twitter tweets by a day. And it's a normal school in the road that are called Ribea Intermediate School, where South Africa shouldn't intervene in the communication. And it's now anyway school vacation, but so much Twitter tweets that come through that school, that comes through this television New Zealand office. Government New Zealand, Police New Zealand, they have to get control over those communications. And while we are at that, with the seriousness of the sensitivity of this week's discussion, let us educate ourselves to learn to adhere to responsibility business, and to therefore adhere to legislation. Because when we adhere to responsibility business, then we educate ourselves to adhere to legislation in all accuracy. And that are today with me with mindset control over attitude.